This is an incredibly influential film.
Absolutely. Every little moment works perfectly. It only gets better each time you see it.
Hidey-ho!
It is the definition of filmmaking at its best.
And it just lights up the screen. It kind of blows all the competition away. It's essential.
See, Mr. Spade, I'm trying to recover ornament that, shall we say, has been mislaid. I thought and hoped you could assist me. The ornament is a statuette, black figure of a bird. I am prepared to pay on behalf of the figure's rightful owner the sum of $5,000 for its recovery. I am prepared to promise that, what is the phrase, no questions will be asked.
You picked two noirs for the essentials, and they might be ranked 1 and 2 on a list of the best noirs of all time.
Therefore essential.
Therefore essential, yeah. And out of the past, 1947, Maltese Falcon, which we have now, 1941, and often considered the first noir.
Yeah, and it doesn't just have to do with, you know, dark shadows and things like that. It has to do with characters who are all on some level corrupt, you know. And again, Bogart plays a guy with a lot of character flaws and, you know, not a perfect guy by any stretch, but he is compelling and you are with him in this film. And Sidney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre are just like from movie heaven.
That's wonderful, sir, wonderful. I do like a man who tells you right after he's looking out for himself. Don't we all? I don't trust a man who says he's not.
John Huston saw Sidney Greenstreet in a play in Los Angeles. He'd never been in a movie before.
Really?
Yeah, and thought, that's the guy I want for Casper Gutman.
Yeah, and you know, the fact that he shoots him low so his belly is big on the screen, you know, it's just great. You just sit there and enjoy it. And he has a ton of great lines. I love talking to a man who loves to talk, you know, and all this stuff. It's just great. And Peter Lorre's character is very different than the character when he shows up very shortly, but very memorably in Casablanca. You know, he has a lot more screen time in this movie.
Yeah, much more to do.
And he just is fantastic.
Greenstreet and Lorre, you know, they're connected. But Greenstreet, who we see as such a sophisticated actor, Mary Astor wrote that he was so nervous before his first scene, and he held her hand, and he said, "Tell me, Mary, reassure me that I'm not going to fall on my face." You know?
That's great, because you would never guess that, because he holds the screen with such authority in the movie as if he's been doing it all his life. He kind of owns every scene he's in.
And it's a testament to a first-time director, John Huston, never directed a movie before.
Trusted screenwriter.
They liked the screenplay. They were going to give it to another director. He wanted to do it, so they're like, all right, well, we're cutting your budget.
Right.
Have at it.
And you know what? They got a bargain.
Yeah.
You know, it's a really handsome movie, and you don't ever feel that you're missing anything.
The leads here, Humphrey Bogart and Mary Astor, they're both great.
They're both great, and Bogart had been around kind of like John Huston had, more so than John Huston. He'd been in a lot of movies at this point, but this was one of the movies that made him a star.
No question. I mean, famously, George Raft passed on it. Thank God George Raft passed. It was a blessing, because he got Bogart.
And that's one of those weird stories, because other than, you know, Some Like It Hot, where he's playing a caricature of himself, George Raft has minimal, he's not really around, even though he was a bigger star than Bogart at the time. It kind of eludes me what was so magnetic about him at the, you know, why he was considered a star at the time.
He missed the bus. Like, he missed what was happening around him. And the movies became less and less theatrical, right? As we sort of understood that there's a different way of acting in the movies than on stage, and Raft was, I think, a little tied to that old way, and Bogart he got it, and Mary Astor got it.
Yeah, and Bogart straddled that really well, because he could play a tough guy and do everything that George Raft could do, but he could also do a thousand things more. And there's something about Bogart's persona that is very contemporary, and modern audiences respond to it because it's sort of world-weary.
Let's watch it. Here it is. From 1941, directed by John Huston, Humphrey Bogart, Mary Astor, Gladys George, Greenstreet, and Laurie in the Maltese Falcon. This is filmmaking at its best.
It's essential.
Brad, let me ask you this, because often when I watch a movie, especially a drama like this one, if I lose the thread of what's happening, I get taken out of the story because I'm bothered by, and I'm certainly not alone in this, thinking, wait, why are they there? How would they know to go there?
Right.
And somehow, for the great noirs, it doesn't matter. This movie is super hard to follow, and Out of the Past baffles me. I mean, this isn't as hard to follow as The Big Sleep, but nonetheless, it somehow with good noirs, it doesn't matter.
And I think it has to do, in a weird way, with shadows and darkness, and I mean metaphorical darkness as well. It kind of falls into a different emotional pool, I think. And you forgive it, the sort of looseness with chronology and facts and things like that. It's like right before you go to sleep. You're kind of here, but you're kind of got one foot in the dreamland. And that, to me, is sort of where noir sits. You know, famously, you know, which film is it? It's, I think, Big Sleep. They asked Raymond Chandler, like,
oh, yeah.
like, who actually, I don't understand one of these murders. And he didn't know the answer. And he was the guy that made it up.
Yeah, and the Big Sleep is totally baffling, and yet still, the experience is enjoyable. I mean, again, one of your other essentials picks, Out of the Past, which is probably my favorite noir, many people's favorite noir.
Right.
Bruce Springsteen's favorite noir.
Oh, wow.
And yet, you can't, there's stuff that happens toward the last 30 minutes of that, and you're like, how do they know?
Yeah. If you were trying to
matter.
explain it to somebody, you would fail.
No, it's about feel and mood.
Yes, and that's why I mentioned that sort of twilight, you know, feeling, because you got one hand in both light and darkness, even though noir means darkness. You know, logic is kind of on its way out the door.
So famously in this movie, you see Walter Huston, John Huston's dad. It's a cameo. He wanted to be in his son's first directorial effort.
Cool, but he got his wish in a major way a few years later with Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Oh, that's right. A perfect film, and Walter Huston's so memorable in it.
He won an Oscar.
He won an Oscar. Brad, thanks very much.
My pleasure, Ben.
Here's a quick look at what's coming up next time on The Essentials with Brad Bird. Powell and Pressburger's A Matter of Life and Death from 1947.
This film is shot by Jack Cardiff, who was one of the greatest cinematographers that ever lived.
David Niven had been a star before the war. From 39 to 45, Niven was in the Army. This is his first movie back.
Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger have a body of work that is one of the greatest in all of film.
It's heaven, isn't it?
That's next Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Continue the conversation on Facebook and Twitter using the hashtag TCM Essentials. Thanks for joining us for The Essentials.